Today we will talk about UN Convention on Biological Diversity. This convention is important from semester point of view, UGC, UPSC and other competitive exams. We have already discussed about the concept of biological diversity, its types and use. You will find the link of it in the description box. Now, in this video, we will talk about the key provisions of the convention. The convention was adopted at Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro on 5th of June 1992 and it came into force on 9th of December 1993. It has 196 members till today. The convention was adopted with three main objectives. The first objective is conservation of biological diversity. As we have discussed earlier, that biological diversity is necessary to maintain the life cycle so that all species can survive and the ecosystem can be maintained. With this motive, this objective, that is conservation of biological diversity, was maintained. Because if any species get extinct, then this life cycle will disrupt and eventually all the species will get extinct. Secondly, we also talked about the economic value of the biological resources. Now, what happened that the people use or exploit these resources at a high rate, which results into diminishing of these resources. Now, it will create hurdle for the future generation as they will not get any resources. Now, to tackle this problem, the second objective of the convention is the sustainable use of biological resources, which means that biological resources should be used in such a manner that these resources can be made available for the present as well as for the future generation. Now, the third objective of the convention is fair and equitable use and sharing of the benefits emerging from the use of genetic resources. Now, to understand this objective, it is important to know what are genetic resources. Now, all the biological resources, whether flora or fauna, has certain genes. Now, we need to preserve these genes. These genes are called genetic resources. These genes are preserved for further production or to give rise to another kind of species. Now, whatever the benefit we get from the use of these genetic resources, those benefits should be equitably shared. Now, question arises, it should be shared with whom? Now, the genetic resources, the use of genetic resources are come into existence due to the traditional knowledge of the indigenous people. Now, it is very important that the benefit should also be shared with these indigenous people. Key provisions are Article 3. Article 3 lays down the cardinal principle of the convention, which says that each country has its own ratio of biological resources and each country has a sovereign right over those resources. Sovereign right means they have exclusive right to use and exploit these resources in whatever manner they want. But there is one restriction, that is they cannot use these resources which is adverse or harmful for the other countries or states. Article is Article 4. Article 4 talks about the jurisdictional application of the convention. It says that the convention will regulate the activities of the contracting party. Contracting parties means those countries which signed the convention, they are bound by the provisions of this convention. Now, firstly, while using the biological resources of their country, the countries are bound to follow the provisions of this convention. Secondly, they are undertaking number of activities related to their biological resources. Now, those activities might be conducted in some other area or it can cause effect in another area. Irrespective of this, the activities related to biological diversity will be governed by this convention if the control over those activities is of the contracting party. For example, if India's neighboring country is not a party to the convention, but India is a contracting party to the convention. Now, India is undertaking an activity related to biological diversity or biological resources in another country which is not a contracting party of the convention. Still, the activity will be governed by the provision of this convention because the activity is in the control of India, which is the contracting party of this convention. Next provision is Article 5, which talks about the principle of cooperation. It lays down that all the contracting parties should cooperate and help each other to achieve the mutual interest, that is, conservation of biological diversity and sustainable use of it. Provision is Article 9, which talks about in situ conservation, which means that the ecosystem should be maintained and preserved so that all the flora and fauna can grow and prosper in their native or natural habitat. And for that, each contracting state shall designate an area called as protected area and make rules and regulation for the designation, maintenance of those protected areas. Article 15 talks about access to genetic resources. We have already discussed about genetic resources and its importance. Now, each country need to frame rules and regulation with regard to give access to genetic resources, because each contracting state has a sovereign right over their natural resources, so they have the sole authority to decide whether to give access or not to give access and under what condition access can be given. But it is important that the condition of granting access to genetic resources must be priorly framed. Secondly, the permission to the access to genetic resources must be based on mutually agreed terms and conditions. Next is that each contracting state shall conduct scientific research with regard to genetic resources if it is already undertaken by the other contracting state. And each contracting state should develop legislative, administrative, and other policy measures with regard to the sharing of the benefits arising from the use of genetic resources, which we have discussed earlier that it is one of the key objective of the convention as well. Next provision is Article 16, which talks about the transfer of technology. Now, as per Article 16, each contracting state should transfer the technology to each other which is beneficial for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, which will ultimately help to achieve the objective of the convention. And if the technology is subject to IPR, then the transfer should be made so that the IPR is not affected. Next provision is Article 17, which talks about exchange of information. Similar to Article 16, Article 17 also obligates the contracting states to exchange information with each other. Such information can be related to indigenous or traditional knowledge, uh, specific knowledge, technical, scientific, social, or economic research, or it can be related to the conservation or sustainable use of biological diversity. If there is any information either gathered from public or private resources should be shared with other contracting states of the provision is Article 27, which deals with dispute settlement. It provides two kind of means by which a dispute among the contracting parties can be resolved. First means which includes negotiation between the contracting parties, and if those negotiation does not work, then they can go for good offices or mediation by a third party. The other means are compulsory means, which includes arbitration or submission of the matter to the ICJ, that is International Court of Justice. I hope the key provisions of the conventions are clear to you, and if there is any doubt, please comment.